You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin.
The neon sign flickered weakly in the rain, casting an eerie red glow over the empty parking lot. Mario's Pizza, it read, the NZ sputtering in and out of existence like a dying firefly. I sighed, glancing at the clock on my dashboard, 11:47 p.m. Just one more delivery and I could call it a night. I'd been driving for Mario's for about 6 months now, a job I'd taken to help pay for college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and usually wasn't too eventful. Usually. The pizza box sat on the passenger seat, steam still rising from the vents. The address was way out on the edge of our delivery zone, a part of town I wasn't too familiar with. As I pulled out of the lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this delivery felt off. The rain intensified as I drove, fat droplets splattering against the windshield faster than my wipers could clear them. The streets grew narrower, the houses more spread out. Soon, I was driving down a winding road with dense forest on either side. My GPS chirped, instructing me to turn onto a gravel driveway I almost missed. The path was overgrown, branches scraping against the sides of my car as I inched forward. After what felt like an eternity, the trees opened up to reveal a ramshackle house, its windows dark save for a single light on the second floor. I parked and grabbed the pizza, the box already growing cold in the damp night air. As I approached the front door, the porch steps creaked ominously beneath my feet. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door swung open. The man who stood there made me take an involuntary step back. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a wild beard and eyes that seemed to bore right through me. He wore a stained wife-beater and jeans that had seen better days. Pizza delivery," I stammered, holding out the box. The man's face split into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Right on time," he said, his voice a low growl. "Why don't you bring that inside? I've got to grab my wallet." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my car and drive away as fast as I could. But I was new to this job, and I didn't want to risk getting fired over a misunderstanding. So, against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The interior of the house was dark and cluttered. The air was thick with the smell of cigarette smoke and something else. Something metallic that made my nose wrinkle. The man led me through a narrow hallway into what I assumed was the living room. "Set it down there," he said, gesturing to a coffee table littered with empty beer cans and overflowing ashtrays. "I'll be right back with the money." He disappeared up a creaky staircase, leaving me alone in the dim room. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I glanced around, looking for a quick exit if I needed one. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden behind a ratty armchair, was a duffel bag. It was unzipped, and poking out of it was something that made my blood run cold, the barrel of a gun. I froze, my mind racing. This wasn't just some eccentric customer. Something was very, very wrong here. I had to get out. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, I heard the man's heavy footsteps coming back down the stairs. Panic seized me. I couldn't let him know I'd seen the gun. I had to act normal. The man reappeared, a wad of crumpled bills in his hand. "Here you go, kid," he said, holding out the money. "Keep the change." My hand shook as I reached for the cash. As I did, I noticed dark stains on his knuckles, stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. "Thanks," I managed to croak out. "Have a good night." I turned to leave, trying to keep my pace steady even though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to run. I was almost to the front door when I heard it, a muffled thump from upstairs, followed by what sounded like a strangled cry. The man's hand clamped down on my shoulder, his grip like iron. You hear something, boy? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. My eyes darted to the door, tantalizingly close yet impossibly far. Good, he said, his tone menacing. Because there's nothing to hear. Now why don't you get on home? It's late, and these roads can be dangerous at night. He practically shoved me out the door, slamming it behind me. I stumbled down the porch steps, my legs feeling like jelly. The moment I reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. As I reversed down the driveway, my headlights swept across the house one last time. And there, in the upstairs window, I saw a face. A woman's face, pale and terrified, her mouth open in a silent scream. I floored it, gravel spraying as I peeled out onto the main road. My mind was reeling, trying to process what I'd just seen. The gun, the blood, the woman in the window. It all added up to a horrifying conclusion. I needed to call the police. But as I reached for my phone, doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if it was all just a misunderstanding? My imagination running wild. I could lose my job, or worse, get in trouble for making a false report. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to make a decision. Drive back to the pizzeria and pretend nothing happened, or potentially save someone's life. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. I dialed 911, my voice shaky as I relayed what I'd seen to the dispatcher. They told me to drive to the nearest police station and wait there. The next few hours were a blur of questions and statements. I told the police everything: the gun, the blood, the woman in the window. They seemed to take it seriously, especially when I gave them the address. It wasn't until the next morning that I found out the full story. The man, it turned out, was wanted in connection with a string of disappearances across 3 states. When the police raided the house, they found evidence of multiple victims. And the woman I saw, she was still alive, held captive in an upstairs bedroom. If I hadn't made that delivery, if I hadn't called the police, she likely wouldn't have survived another day. The following weeks were chaotic. There were more interviews with detectives, a commendation from the police department, even a few requests for interviews from local news stations. Mario gave me a raise and told me I could take as much time off as I needed. But even as the dust settled and life began to return to normal, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. The flickering neon sign, the rain-slicked roads, the face in the window. It all haunted my dreams. I kept delivering pizzas, though. Something about the job felt different now. More important somehow. Every delivery could be someone's lifeline. Every interaction a chance to make a difference. And every time I pull up to a house I've never been to before, every time I knock on a stranger's door, I'm acutely aware of the thin line between ordinary and extraordinary, between a routine delivery and a life-changing event. Because sometimes, the most important moments of our lives come disguised as the most mundane. Sometimes, a simple pizza delivery can change everything. The lock clicked open with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. As the door swung inward, revealing the rustic interior of our rented cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into something we couldn't easily escape. If only I'd known then how right that feeling was. Home sweet home for the next week, my boyfriend, Matt, said cheerfully, lugging our bags over the threshold. I followed him in, taking in the cozy living room with its stone fireplace and the small kitchenette beyond. It was charming, in that quaint, middle-of-nowhere sort of way. We'd found the listing online, a secluded cabin in the woods, perfect for a romantic getaway. The photos showed stunning views of the surrounding forest and promised a peaceful retreat from our hectic city lives. The price had been almost too good to be true, but we jumped at the chance. Now, standing in the actual space, I felt a tinge of unease. The air inside was stuffy and smelled faintly of mildew. The furniture, while clean, had a worn look that spoke of years of use. And was it my imagination, or did the floorboards creak a little too much under our feet? "Let's open some windows," I suggested, trying to shake off my nerves. It's a bit musty in here. Matt nodded, moving to the nearest window. He struggled with it for a moment before it finally budged, sliding up with a protesting groan. Guess they don't open these much, he joked. I forced a smile, but something about the way the window had resisted bothered me. It was almost as if it didn't want to be opened. We spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, unpacking our clothes and stocking the small fridge with the groceries we'd brought. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Matt lit a fire in the fireplace. The warmth and flickering light helped ease some of my tension. "See, this isn't so bad," Matt said, wrapping an arm around me as we sat on the worn sofa. Just what we needed to relax and reconnect. I leaned into him, wanting to believe it. But as the darkness outside deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I glanced at the windows, I half expected to see a face peering in at us. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to get comfortable in the unfamiliar bed. The mattress was lumpy, and the sheets smelled faintly of mothballs. But it wasn't just physical discomfort keeping me awake. There were noises, creaks and groans that seemed too deliberate to be just an old house settling. At one point, I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the hallway outside our room. I lay there, heart pounding, straining to hear, but there was nothing but silence. The next morning, I woke to find Matt already up and making coffee in the kitchenette. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing me a steaming mug. I shook my head, taking a sip of the strong brew. "Not really. This place makes weird noises at night," he chuckled. "That's part of the charm, isn't it? The authentic cabin experience," I wanted to argue. To tell him about the footsteps I thought I'd heard, but I didn't want to spoil our vacation with my paranoia. Instead, I suggested we go for a hike after breakfast. The woods around the cabin were beautiful, all towering pines and dappled sunlight. For a few hours, as we trekked along barely visible trails, I forgot about my unease from the night before. But as we made our way back to the cabin, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. "Matt," I said, grabbing his arm. "Do you see that?" He followed my gaze to a spot between two distant trees. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing there, watching us, but when I blinked, it was gone. "See what?" Matt asked, squinting in the direction I was pointing. I shook my head. Nothing. Must have been a shadow or something. But I knew it wasn't just a shadow. And as we approached the cabin, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The window we had struggled to open yesterday was now firmly shut. "Did you close that last night?" I asked Matt, trying to keep my voice steady. He frowned. "No, I don't think so. Maybe the wind blew it shut." I nodded, not wanting to voice my suspicion that there hadn't been enough wind to move that stubborn window. Besides, if it had blown shut, wouldn't we have heard it? As the day wore on, more strange things began to happen. Items we were sure we'd left in one place would turn up in another. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly, creating cold spots that made no sense in the summer heat. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. That night, as we lay in bed, the noises started again, but this time, they were louder, more insistent. The creaks and groans were joined by a sound like something being dragged across the floor. "Matt," I whispered, shaking him awake. "Do you hear that?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hear what?" But even as he spoke, a loud thump came from the living room, as if something heavy had fallen. Matt's eyes widened. "Okay, I heard that," he said, throwing back the covers. "Stay here. I'll go check it out." "No!" I grabbed his arm. "We should go together." Slowly, we made our way down the hallway, Matt in front with a flashlight he'd grabbed from the nightstand. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. The living room was exactly as we'd left it. "See? Probably just something outside," Matt said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We were about to head back to bed when I noticed something On the coffee table, next to the book I'd been reading earlier, was a small, leather-bound journal. I was certain it hadn't been there before. With trembling hands, I picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, the ink faded with age. As I skimmed the contents, my heart began to race. It was a diary, belonging to a woman named Eleanor, who had lived in this cabin decades ago. She wrote of strange occurrences, of items moving on their own, of voices in the night. And she wrote of a presence, something dark and malevolent that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The final entry chilled me to the bone. "It's here," Eleanor had written, her usually neat handwriting now a frantic scrawl. "God help me, it's here and I can't escape. If anyone finds this, please, don't stay. Run while you still can." I looked up at Matt, my face pale. "We need to leave. Now." He opened his mouth to argue, but at that moment, every light in the cabin flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, we heard a sound that could only be described as a low, menacing chuckle. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. Grabbing only our phones and car keys, we ran for the door. It resisted at first, as if something was holding it shut, but with a final desperate shove, it flew open. We sprinted to our car, the gravel driveway crunching under our bare feet. As Matt fumbled with the keys, I looked back at the cabin. In the upstairs window, I saw a face, not human, but something twisted and evil, its mouth stretched in a grotesque smile. The engine roared to life and we peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town, where we checked into a motel and spent the rest of the night huddled together, jumping at every sound. In the light of day, it was tempting to dismiss what had happened as an overactive imagination or a shared hallucination. But we both knew what we'd experienced was real. We never went back for our belongings. We contacted the rental company and told them we'd had to leave due to an emergency. They were surprisingly understanding, even offering a partial refund. It wasn't until weeks later, when the nightmares had finally started to subside, that we decided to do some research. What we found made our blood run cold all over again. The cabin had a history, it turned out. Over the years, several renters had fled in the middle of the night, telling tales of supernatural occurrences. And there were those who hadn't fled, whose disappearances remained unsolved mysteries. We count ourselves lucky to have escaped. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel that watchful presence. And I wonder if, somehow, a piece of whatever was in that cabin followed us home. So if you're ever browsing online, looking for a quaint cabin in the woods for a romantic getaway, be careful. Sometimes, the perfect retreat is too good to be true. And sometimes the things that go bump in the night are all too real. The first sign that something was wrong was the door to the master bedroom. It was closed. I never closed that door, not since I'd started house-sitting for the Wilsons 2 days ago. I stood there, hand hovering over the doorknob, a chill creeping up my spine despite the summer heat. I'd taken this job as a way to make some extra cash during my college break. The Wilsons were loaded. Their sprawling mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured lawns and gardens. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to find a butler named Jeeves, not a 20-year-old student watering plants and feeding cats. "You'll have the run of the place," Mrs. Wilson had said with a laugh as she handed me the keys. "Just don't throw any wild parties while we're gone." As if I knew anyone who'd want to party in this mausoleum of marble and antiques. No, I'd spent most of my time binge-watching shows on their massive TV and raiding their well-stocked fridge. It was supposed to be an easy gig, but now, staring at that closed door, easy was the last word on my mind. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door swung open silently, revealing the immaculate master suite. Everything looked normal. The king-sized bed with its mountain of pillows, the chaise lounge by the window, the doors to the walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom. And yet, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was like walking into a perfect replica of a room you know well. Everything looks right, but it doesn't feel right. I shook my head, trying to clear away the paranoia. I was letting my imagination run wild. Probably watched one too many horror movies on that big TV. I was about to leave when I noticed it, a faint scent in the air, something floral and unfamiliar. It wasn't Mrs. Wilson's usual perfume, which lingered on her clothes in the closet. This was different, fresher. My heart began to race. Had someone been in here? I did a quick scan of the room, looking for anything out of place. The jewelry box on the dresser caught my eye. Was it slightly askew? With trembling hands, I opened it. I didn't know much about jewelry, but even I could tell that the glittering diamonds and pearls inside were worth a fortune, and they all seemed to be there. If someone had broken in, why wouldn't they take these? A noise from downstairs made me jump. It sounded like footsteps, but that was impossible. I was alone in the house. The cats were outside. The cleaning service wasn't due for days, and the Wilsons weren't set to return from their European vacation for another week. I crept to the top of the grand staircase, straining my ears. Silence. Maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again. The unmistakable sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Panic seized me. I should run, I thought. Get out of the house and call the police. But curiosity, that deadly impulse that's felled so many horror movie protagonists, got the better of me. I had to know who was down there. As quietly as I could, I made my way down the stairs, grateful for the plush carpet that muffled my footsteps. The noises from the kitchen grew louder. The clink of glasses, the opening and closing of cabinets. It sounded for all the world like someone fixing themselves a drink. I peered around the corner into the kitchen, and my blood ran cold. There, standing at the marble island with his back to me, was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-built, dressed in expensive-looking clothes that seemed at odds with the fact that he was, a burglar. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, who knows, because suddenly he turned. Our eyes met, and for a moment, we both froze. Then he smiled. It wasn't the menacing grin of a villain caught in the act. It was warm, almost friendly. "Ah," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "You must be the house sitter. Care for a drink?" I stood there, mouth agape, unable to process what was happening. This man had broken into the house I was supposed to be watching, and he was offering me a drink like we were at a cocktail party. Who are you?" I finally managed to stammer out. He chuckled, taking a sip from his glass. "On a friend of the family, you could say. Thomas Wilson and I go way back." I frowned. Mr. Wilson had never mentioned any friends having access to the house while they were away. "I don't believe you," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I'm calling the police." I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, he spoke again. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Not unless you want Thomas to find out about your little, explorations." I froze. How could he know? I'd been so careful. On my second night here, curiosity had gotten the better of me. I'd started poking around in Mr. Wilson's study, opening drawers, leafing through papers. I told myself I was just being thorough in my house-sitting duties, but deep down, I knew it was wrong. The man smiled again, but this time there was an edge to it. "Oh yes, I know all about that. Just like I know about the little joyride you took in the Bentley yesterday. Tsk-tsk. What would the Wilsons say?" My mind raced. How could he possibly know these things? Unless, "You've been watching me," I said, the realization dawning with a sickening clarity. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Bright girl." "Yes, I've been keeping an eye on things, making sure the Wilsons' property is secure." "But why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you really?" He set his glass down and leaned against the counter, fixing me with an intense stare. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in the Wilsons' affairs. and in making sure certain sensitive information remains private. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What kind of information? The kind that could ruin a man like Thomas Wilson, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The kind that's worth killing for. I gasped, taking an involuntary step back. You're blackmailing him. He shrugged, the gesture casual, but his eyes never leaving mine. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial arrangement, one that's been working quite well for years now. My mind was reeling. The perfect, wealthy Wilsons. What dark secrets were they hiding? And what had I stumbled into? What happens now? I asked, hating how small and scared my voice sounded. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now you have a choice to make, my dear. You can forget this ever happened, finish your house-sitting job, and walk away with a nice paycheck and your conscience clear. Or, he let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. Or what? I whispered. Or you can try to be a hero, call the police, tell the Wilsons what you've seen. But consider this, who do you think they'll believe? A trusted family friend or a college student who's been snooping through their private things and joyriding in their cars? I felt sick. He was right. I had no proof, and I'd abused the Wilsons' trust. Even if they believed me, I'd still be in trouble. So what'll it be? He asked, picking up his glass again. The easy way, or the hard way? I stood there, frozen in indecision. The right thing to do was clear. I should call the police. Consequences be damned. But fear, that primal instinct for self-preservation, held me back. In the end, it wasn't courage or morality that decided it. It was pure, dumb luck. At that moment, headlights swept across the kitchen window. A car was coming up the driveway. The man's eyes widened in surprise. Impossible, he muttered. They're not due back for days. But the sound of car doors slamming, followed by familiar voices, proved him wrong. The Wilsons were home early. In the chaos that followed, the Wilsons' shock at finding an intruder, my fumbling explanations, the man's smooth lies, the truth came out. It wasn't pretty. There were tears, recriminations, threats of legal action. But in the end, justice prevailed. The man, whose real name I never learned, was arrested. The Wilsons' secrets, whatever they were, remained hidden. And me, I lost my house-sitting jobs, of course, but gained something far more valuable, a story I'll never forget, and a lesson about the dangers of curiosity. Now, whenever I pass by a grand house with its manicured lawns and gleaming windows, I can't help but wonder what secrets lie behind those perfect facades. But I've learned my lesson. Some doors are better left unopened, some questions better left unasked, because you never know when you might find yourself caught in the middle of someone else's dangerous game. The security camera feed flickered to life, revealing an empty corridor bathed in the sickly glow of fluorescent lights. I leaned closer to the monitor, my eyes straining in the darkness of the security office. That's when I saw it, a shadow darting across the screen, there and gone in an instant. My heart rate quickened. I was supposed to be alone in this building tonight. My name's Mike, and I've been working the night shift at Grayson Tech for about 6 months now. It's a big, soulless office building on the outskirts of the city, all glass and steel and eerily quiet after hours. Most nights, my biggest challenge is staying awake, but tonight was different. Tonight, something was off. I flipped through the different camera feeds, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing on the ground floor, nothing in the stairwells. But then, as I switched to the view of the executive offices on the top floor, I saw it again. A figure, moving swiftly between the cubicles, clearly trying to avoid detection. My first instinct was to call the police, but something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that there was more going on here than a simple break-in. Whatever it was, I found myself reaching for the keycard that would give me access to the upper floors. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like it took an eternity. With each passing second, my mind raced through possible scenarios. Was it a burglar, a disgruntled employee, or something worse? The doors slid open with a soft ding that seemed deafening in the silence of the night. I stepped out cautiously, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The executive floor was a maze of cubicles and corner offices, most of them filled with expensive-looking furniture and state-of-the-art computers. I moved slowly, my ears straining for any sound. For a moment, all I could hear was the soft hum of electronics and the pounding of my own heart. Then, from somewhere to my left, came the unmistakable sound of typing. Creeping towards the noise, I rounded a corner and froze. There, bathed in the blue glow of a computer screen, sat a woman I recognized from the company directory, Sarah Chen, one of the senior software engineers. "Miss Chen," I called out, my voice shaky. She whirled around, her eyes wide with fear and... Was that guilt? "Who are you?" she demanded, her hand moving to close the laptop. I stepped forward, shining my flashlight badge. "Mike Thompson, Night Security." "What are you doing here so late?" Sarah's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But then she straightened, a look of determination crossing her face. "I'm uncovering the truth," she said. "And now that you're here, you need to see this too." Confused and more than a little wary, I moved closer. Sarah reopened the laptop, revealing lines of code that meant nothing to me. "Grayson Tech isn't what you think it is," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The software we're developing, it's not just for business analytics. It's a surveillance tool, more powerful than anything that's ever existed." I frowned, not quite understanding. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It can track anyone, anywhere. Social media, security cameras, financial transactions. It pulls it all together in real time. And it's being sold to governments, corporations, anyone who can afford it." The implications hit me like a truck. If what she was saying was true, this was big, huge, the kind of thing that could bring down companies and topple governments. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my mouth dry. Sarah's eyes met mine, and I saw the fear there, but also a steely resolve. "Because I need your help. I'm gathering evidence, but I can't do this alone. If they catch me..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what happened to whistleblowers in the corporate world. I should have said no. Should have walked away and pretended I'd never seen any of this. But something in Sarah's eyes, the desperation and the determination, made me nod. "What do you need me to do?" For the next hour, Sarah walked me through what she'd discovered: the secret servers hidden in the building's basement, the coded messages in seemingly innocuous emails, the offshore accounts where the money from these less-than-legal sales was being funneled. As the night wore on, I found myself pulled deeper into a world of corporate espionage and government conspiracies. It was like something out of a movie, except this was real, and the danger was palpable. We were so engrossed in our work that we almost missed the sound of the elevator arriving on our floor. Sarah's head snapped up, her face pale. "They're here," she whispered. I didn't need to ask who they were. We quickly shut down the computer and ducked behind a row of cubicles. Peering over the top, I saw two men in expensive suits step out of the elevator. Even from a distance, I could see the bulge of weapons under their jackets. "We need to get out of here," I whispered to Sarah. She nodded, clutching a small flash drive that contained all the evidence we'd gathered. Slowly, carefully, we began to make our way towards the emergency stairs at the far end of the office. We could hear the men moving through the cubicles, their voices low but angry. "We know you're here, Sarah," one of them called out. "Make this easy on yourself. You know you can't win against us." Sarah's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing it tightly. I could feel her trembling, but her voice was steady when she whispered, "We have to make it. The world needs to know the truth." We were almost to the stairs when disaster struck. In the darkness, I stumbled over a trash can, sending it clattering across the floor. The noise was deafening in the quiet office. "There!" one of the men shouted. Footsteps pounded towards us. "Run!" I yelled, pushing Sarah towards the stairs. We burst through the door and started down, taking the steps two at a time. Behind us, I could hear the men in pursuit, their shoes echoing in the stairwell. My mind raced as we descended. We couldn't go to the lobby, they'd have that covered. But maybe... "This way," I gasped, pulling Sarah through a door on the third floor. If I remembered the building layout correctly, there was a fire escape on this level that led to the alley behind the building. We sprinted through the darkened office, the shouts of our pursuers growing closer. There, the window that led to the fire escape. I fumbled with the latch, my hands slick with sweat. Just as the door to the office burst open, the window swung free. "Go," I urged Sarah, helping her through. I followed quickly, pulling the window shut behind us. The metal of the fire escape creaked ominously as we clambered down. Above us, I could hear the men cursing as they realized where we'd gone. A gunshot rang out, the bullet pinging off the railing near my head. We hit the ground running, Sarah clutching the flash drive like it was a lifeline. Which, in a way, it was. Behind us, I could hear the men starting down the fire escape. "My car's this way," Sarah panted as we rounded the corner of the building. In moments, we were speeding away from Grayson Tech, the lights of the city blurring around us. As the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of what we'd just done started to sink in. We were fugitives now, in possession of information that some very powerful people would kill to keep secret. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We take this to someone who can help. I have a contact at a news organization. If we can get this information to them..." I nodded, understanding. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but we had a chance now. A chance to expose the truth and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. As we drove through the night, leaving the city and its secrets behind, I couldn't help but think about how much my life had changed in just a few short hours. I'd gone from a simple night security guard to a conspirator in what could be one of the biggest whistleblowing events in history. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we'd succeed or if we'd end up as just another pair of unnamed casualties in the war between truth and power. But I did know one thing. I couldn't go back to my old life. Not now. Not after what I'd seen. As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, I made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we faced, I would see this through to the end. The truth had to come out. And if it was up to us to make that happen, then so be it. The night shift at Grayson Tech was over, but our real work, it was just beginning. The rusty gate creaked open, its protest echoing through the still night air. I hesitated, one foot on the overgrown path leading to the abandoned Oakwood Asylum. The dilapidated building loomed before us, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down accusingly. This was a bad idea. I knew it, but the thrill of adventure and the goading of my friends pushed me forward. "Come on, Alex. Don't chicken out now," Mia called from ahead, her flashlight beam dancing erratically across the crumbling facade. I took a deep breath and stepped fully onto the property, the gate clanging shut behind me with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. There were 4 of us. Mia, our self-appointed leader, Jake, her boyfriend and resident skeptic, Liv, our amateur photographer, and me, the reluctant voice of reason that no one ever listened to. We'd been planning this excursion for weeks, ever since Mia stumbled across an article about the asylum's dark history. Opened in the 1800s and shut down in the 1970s amid allegations of patient abuse and unethical experiments, Oakwood had become the stuff of local legend. Ghost hunters and thrill seekers had tried to explore it over the years. but most were scared off by the building's deteriorating state or chased away by the police. But tonight was different. The full moon provided just enough light to navigate by, and Mia's cousin on the police force had tipped her off that patrols would be light. It was now or never. As we approached the main entrance, the weight of the building's history seemed to press down on us. Graffiti covered the lower walls, a crude attempt to mask the institution's grim past with color. Liv snapped a few photos, the flash momentarily illuminating the decrepit porch. "Okay, everyone remember the plan?" Mia whispered, her excitement palpable. "We stick together. We don't touch anything we don't have to. And if anyone wants to leave, we all leave. Got it?" We nodded in agreement, though I noticed Jake rolling his eyes. He'd made it clear he thought this whole ghost hunting thing was ridiculous, but he wasn't about to let Mia go in without him. The front door was chained shut, but Jake made quick work of it with the bolt cutters he'd brought. The chain fell away with a clank that seemed to echo forever in the quiet night. Mia pushed the door open, and we were hit with a wave of stale, musty air. Stepping inside was like crossing a threshold into another world. Our flashlights revealed a reception area frozen in time. Dust-covered chairs lined the walls, and an ancient reception desk stood sentinel, its surface littered with moldering papers and long-dead plants. "This is incredible," Liv breathed, her camera clicking rapidly. "It's like they just walked out one day and never came back." We moved deeper into the building, our footsteps echoing off the peeling walls. The beam of my flashlight caught something etched into the paint, a name, "Help Me," scratched with desperate intensity. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. The further we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thicker, heavier with dust and decay. We passed by old treatment rooms, their equipment rusted and ominous in the dim light. An overturned gurney in one hallway made us all jump, its wheels squeaking slightly as our movement disturbed decades of stillness. "Hey, check this out," Jake called, his voice unnaturally loud in the quiet. He was standing in front of a heavy metal door, its surface marred by deep scratches. "Looks like someone really wanted out of here." As we gathered around, I noticed something odd. Unlike everything else we'd seen, this door seemed cleaner somehow, less dusty. Before I could point this out, Mia was already pushing it open. The room beyond was pitch black, swallowing our flashlight beams. As we stepped inside, I felt a change in the air. It was cooler here, with a faint breeze that shouldn't have been possible in a sealed building. "Guys, I don't like this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should—" I never finished that sentence. The door slammed shut behind us with a resounding bang, plunging us into total darkness. Liv screamed, and I heard the clatter of her camera hitting the floor. "What the hell?" Jake's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Mia, where are you? Everyone okay?" I fumbled with my flashlight, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of it. When I finally got it working, the beam revealed a room that hadn't been there a moment ago. Gone was the decrepit asylum interior. Instead, we found ourselves in what looked like a modern laboratory, all gleaming stainless steel and softly humming machinery. This isn't possible," Mia whispered, her earlier bravado completely gone. "Where are we?" Before anyone could answer, a door at the far end of the room hissed open. A figure stepped through, backlit so we couldn't make out any features. But its silhouette was all wrong. Too tall, limbs too long and jointed in impossible ways. "Welcome," it said, its voice a harsh, metallic rasp that set my teeth on edge. "We've been waiting for you." Panic set in. We turned to flee, only to find the door we'd entered through was gone, replaced by a smooth, featureless wall. We were trapped. What followed was a nightmare of flashing lights, screeching alarms, and the constant, terrifying presence of our inhuman hosts. They herded us through endless corridors, separated us, subjected us to tests and procedures I still can't bring myself to describe. I lost all sense of time. It could have been hours or days before I found myself back in that first room, reunited with my friends. We were different now, changed in ways both subtle and profound. Liv's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Jake's skin had a metallic sheen to it. Mia wasn't Mia anymore. Not really. The figure from before stood watching us, its featureless face somehow conveying amusement. The experiment was a success, it said. You may go. Just like that, we were outside again, standing in front of the abandoned asylum as if nothing had happened. But we knew better. The building's windows now gleamed with an otherworldly light, and we could hear the faint hum of machinery from within. We stumbled away, each lost in our own thoughts, trying to process what had happened to us. As we reached the gate, I turned back for one last look. The asylum seemed to shimmer, its form shifting subtly before my eyes. For a moment, I saw it as it truly was. Not an abandoned relic, but a facade hiding something far more advanced and alien than we could have imagined. We never spoke about that night again. Not really. How could we? Who would believe us? But sometimes, when I catch a glimpse of the strange glow in Liv's eyes or notice the way Jake's skin reflects light just a little too perfectly, I'm reminded that our adventure was all too real. And late at night, when the moon is full and the world is quiet, I swear I can hear it, that metallic voice calling me back to Oakwood Asylum, back to the place where everything changed and where I fear a part of me will always remain. I don't know if we uncovered some long-buried secret that night, or if we stumbled into something that was never meant for human eyes. All I know is that the next time someone suggests exploring an abandoned building, I'll be running in the opposite direction. Because sometimes, the unknown is better left undiscovered, and some doors are meant to stay closed forever. But even as I tell myself this, I can't shake the feeling that our experience at Oakwood was just the beginning. That somewhere out there, in other abandoned places and forgotten corners of the world, similar experiments are taking place. And I wonder, with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity, what will happen when whatever is behind it all decides it's time to stop hiding? For now, though, I'll keep my head down and try to live a normal life. But a part of me will always be on guard, watching for signs that the world isn't what it seems. Because once you've seen behind the curtain, there's no going back. And in the end, the scariest thing isn't what we found in that asylum. It's the knowledge that it's still out there, waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. The GPS chimed cheerfully, announcing that I had arrived at my destination. I stared out the windshield, my hand still gripping the steering wheel, at a town that definitely wasn't Millbrook. The faded welcome sign read, Willow Creek, population 714. But something about those numbers seemed off, like they hadn't been updated in decades. I'd been driving for hours, heading to my cousin's wedding in Millbrook. It was supposed to be a straight shot down the highway, but somewhere along the way, my usually reliable GPS had led me astray. Now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of red and purple, I found myself in a place that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Willow Creek's main street stretched before me, lined with buildings that seemed more suited to the 1950s than the present day. Neon signs flickered weakly in shop windows, and the few people visible on the sidewalks moved with an odd, shuffling gait that set my nerves on edge. I pulled over, fishing my phone out of my pocket to try and figure out where I'd gone wrong. No signal, of course. I sighed, resigning myself to the fact that I'd have to ask for directions the old-fashioned way. The diner across the street seemed as good a place as any to start. Its chrome exterior gleamed dully in the fading light, and a buzzing sign proclaimed it, Dot's Diner, best pie in the county. I stepped out of my car, the humid air immediately clinging to my skin. As I approached the diner, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The few people on the street had stopped to stare at me, their eyes unnaturally wide and unblinking. I quickened my pace, pushing open the diner door with more force than necessary. The bell above the door jangled discordantly, drawing the attention of everyone inside. And I do mean everyone. Every head turned in perfect unison to look at me, expressions blank and eyes glazed. For a moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of a radio playing what sounded like a big band tune from the 1940s. I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm a bit lost. Could someone point me in the direction of Millbrook? Silence. Then, slowly, conversation resumed as if I hadn't spoken. The patrons turned back to their meals, forks moving mechanically from plate to mouth. A waitress appeared at my elbow, making me jump. Her name tag read Dot, and her smile was just a little too wide to be natural. "Well, honey, you're a long way from Millbrook," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Why don't you sit down and have a slice of pie while we figure out how to get you back on track?" Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my car and drive as fast and as far as I could. But something in Dot's eyes held me in place. It wasn't kindness, exactly. More like hunger. Before I knew it, I was seated in a booth, a slice of cherry pie in front of me that I definitely hadn't ordered. Dot hovered nearby, that too wide smile still plastered on her face. "Eat up, honey," she urged. "It'll help you think clearer." I picked up the fork, if only to appease her. The pie filling glistened in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of fresh blood. I took a small bite, and immediately my senses were overwhelmed. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted, sweet and tart and rich in a way that seemed impossible. I found myself taking another bite, and another, unable to stop. As I ate, the diner around me seemed to shift and blur. The patrons' movements became more fluid, more natural. The music on the radio clarified, resolving into a tune I almost recognized. Even Dot's smile seemed less forced, more genuine. "Isn't that better?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from me. "Now tell me, what brings you to our little town?" I blinked, trying to remember. Why was I here? Something about a wedding. But that seemed so unimportant now. I'm not sure," I admitted. Dot patted my hand, her touch sending an electric jolt up my arm. "That's all right, honey. Lots of folks find their way here when they're a bit lost. Willow Creek has a way of calling to those who need it." I nodded, finding comfort in her words. The pie was gone, but I didn't remember finishing it. Outside, night had fallen completely, the street now illuminated by the warm glow of old-fashioned street lamps. "Why don't I show you to the hotel?" Dot suggested. "You look like you could use some rest." I followed her out of the diner, my legs moving of their own accord. The street was busier now, filled with people strolling and chatting. They all smiled and nodded at me as if I was an old friend they'd been expecting. The hotel was a grand old building, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the more modest structures surrounding it. As we climbed the steps, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. Dot steadied me with a hand on my elbow, her touch both comforting and unsettling. "Don't worry," she said, her voice sounding distant and echoing. "Everyone feels a bit off at first. You'll adjust soon enough." The lobby was a blur of dark wood and red velvet. I have a vague memory of signing something, of being handed a heavy brass key. Then I was in a room, ornate wallpaper swirling in patterns that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I collapsed onto the bed, my head spinning. As consciousness slipped away, I heard Dot's voice one last time, though I couldn't see her in the room. "Welcome to Willow Creek, honey. You're home now." I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through lace curtains I didn't remember. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The wrong turn, the strange town, Dot's diner, the pie. I sat up, my head pounding. The room around me was like something out of a period drama, all antique furniture and faded elegance. But there was something off about it, like a movie set that wasn't quite convincing up close. I stumbled to the window, pulling back the curtains. The street below was bustling with activity, but it was all wrong. Cars from the 1950s cruised by, fins gleaming in the morning sun. Women in poodle skirts and men in fedoras strolled down the sidewalk. It was like the whole town was stuck in a time warp. My phone. I needed to call for help. But when I reached for it, my pockets were empty. In fact, I realized with growing horror, I was wearing entirely different clothes. A button-up shirt and high-waisted trousers that looked like they came straight out of a vintage store. There was a knock at the door. "Room service," Dot's cheery voice called out. I opened the door cautiously. Dot stood there, balancing a tray with a steaming cup of coffee and another slice of that damn pie. "Good morning, sunshine," she chirped. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up after your long journey." "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. "What is this place? What did you do to me?" Dot's smile never wavered. Now, there's no need for all that. Willow Creek is just a special place for special people who need a fresh start, who want to forget their troubles. And you, my dear, looked like you needed that more than most. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that still clung to my thoughts. But I didn't want this. I was just passing through. I need to get back. I have a wedding to... "A wedding?" Dot interrupted, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, honey, is that what's got you so worked up? Well, why didn't you say so? We love weddings here in Willow Creek. In fact, I think old Mr. Johnson's daughter is getting married this weekend. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you join the celebration." The way she said it made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the true nature of my situation. This wasn't just a strange town. It was a trap, and I had walked right into it. I think I'd like to leave now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dot's smile turned sad. "Oh, honey, don't you know? Nobody ever really leaves Willow Creek, but don't worry. You'll come to love it here.